In a span of less than a year, 2 young lives were tragically lost, both under the care of their grandmother. This is the story of Tracey Nix, a woman whose name would become tied to an unthinkable familial tragedy that unfolded in Florida. Tracey was a former school principal, a figure once admired in her community for her dedication to education and her warm presence as a grandmother. But that perception shattered with the deaths of her grandchildren, Ezra and Uriel Shock. In December 2021, her 16-month-old grandson, Ezra, drowned in a pond while she was supposed to be watching him. Then, in November 2022, just under a year later, her 7-month-old granddaughter, Uriel, died after being left in a hot car for hours. These incidents, occurring so close together, sent shockwaves through the nation, leaving people stunned and searching for answers. How could a grandmother, entrusted with the care of her own flesh and blood, be at the center of such devastating losses? And what consequences would she face in the aftermath? Today we're diving into this heartbreaking case, exploring the events that led to these tragedies, the investigation that uncovered the chilling details, and the legal reckoning that followed. More than that, we'll take a moment to honor the memories of Ezra and Uriel, 2 innocent children whose lives ended far too soon. As we begin, let this story serve as a sobering reminder of the fragility of life and the weight of responsibility that comes with caring for those who cannot protect themselves. Ezra Shock was a 16-month-old bundle of energy, a little boy who brought joy to everyone around him. Born to Drew and Kayla Shock, he was their first child, a toddler with a mop of soft hair and a mischievous grin that could melt hearts. His parents recall how he loved to toddle around their Florida home, chasing after anything that caught his eye, from a rolling ball to the family dog. Ezra had a playful nature, always eager to explore, and his laughter was a constant soundtrack to their days. Kayla once shared how he'd sit in the grass outside, fascinated by the simplest things, like the way leaves moved in the breeze. To his family, he was their light, their reason to smile every morning. Then came Uriel Shock, born just a few months after Ezra's tragic death. At 7 months old, she was a beacon of hope for Drew and Kayla, a daughter they called their rainbow baby, after the storm of losing Ezra. Uriel had a bright smile that seemed to radiate warmth, her big eyes sparkling with curiosity. Her parents adored the way she'd coo and giggle when they scooped her up, her tiny hands reaching out to touch their faces. She loved being held, nestling into their arms as if she knew how much they needed her after everything they'd been through. Drew often said she had a special gift for making people feel loved, even at such a tender age. For the Shock family, Uriel was a second chance at joy, a precious reminder that life could still hold beauty amid sorrow. The love Drew and Kayla had for their children was unshakable. They were attentive parents, always striving to keep Ezra and Uriel safe and happy. After Ezra's death, they became even more protective, determined to shield Uriel from harm. But despite their vigilance, tragedy struck again, leaving a devastating void where their children's laughter once echoed. The loss of Ezra and Uriel, so close together, has left the family grappling with a grief too heavy to bear, a pain that lingers in every quiet moment. On November 3, 2022, the day started like any other for Tracey Nix. Around 11:30 a.m., she picked up her 7-month-old granddaughter Uriel from daycare in Lake County, Florida. The weather was warm and sunny, a typical autumn day in the Sunshine State, with temperatures creeping into the low 90s. Tracey had plans to meet friends for lunch at Beef O'Brady's, a casual restaurant not far from her home. She strapped Uriel into her car seat, and together they made the short drive to the eatery. At the restaurant, Tracey seemed like her usual self, chatting with friends over plates of food, while Uriel sat in a high chair nearby. Witnesses later noted how Tracey fed the baby, adjusted her bib, and smiled as Uriel babbled happily. It was a scene of normalcy, a grandmother enjoying time with her granddaughter. Lunch wrapped up around 1:30 p.m., and Tracey loaded Uriel back into the car seat in her SUV. The drive home took just a few minutes, and by 1:45 p.m. she pulled into her driveway. But instead of bringing Uriel inside, Tracey walked into the house alone, leaving the baby strapped in the back seat. Outside, the sun beat down relentlessly, and the temperature continued to climb. Inside the parked SUV, conditions grew deadly. Experts estimate that within an hour, the interior temperature likely soared past 130 degrees, turning the vehicle into a silent trap. For the next 3 hours, Tracey went about her day, oblivious to the crisis unfolding just steps away. According to the arrest affidavit, she spent time talking to her dog, perhaps playing with it in the living room. She then sat down at her piano, practicing for what she later described as a long time, her fingers moving over the keys as the minutes ticked by. Outside, Uriel remained in the car, her tiny body struggling against the suffocating heat. It wasn't until around 5 p.m., when Tracey's teenage grandson got home from school, that the truth came crashing down. He walked into the house and asked a simple question: "Where's the baby?" In that instant, Tracey's face went pale. She rushed outside, her heart pounding as she opened the car door. But it was too late. Uriel had been in the vehicle for over 3 hours, her small frame limp and lifeless in the car seat. The horror of that moment is hard to fathom. A day that began with routine and warmth had spiraled into an irreversible tragedy, one that would soon draw the attention of law enforcement and the public alike. Tracey's husband, Nix, dialed 911 as soon as they realized what had happened. Emergency responders raced to the scene, arriving to find Uriel still in the car seat, unresponsive. Paramedics worked frantically to revive her, but their efforts were in vain. She was pronounced dead at the scene, a heartbreaking outcome confirmed by an autopsy that listed hyperthermia as the cause of death. The medical examiner's report painted a grim picture. Uriel's body temperature had risen to dangerous levels, her system overwhelmed by the prolonged exposure to extreme heat. Police launched an investigation immediately, piecing together the timeline of that fateful day. Tracey sat down with detectives, her voice trembling as she recounted her actions. In her statement, she admitted she had forgotten Uriel was in the car. She described feeling distracted, though she couldn't pinpoint why. Her account stood in stark contrast to the evidence, a day spent in casual routine while her granddaughter suffered just outside. Witnesses from Beef O'Brady's were interviewed, and they confirmed Tracey had been in good spirits at lunch, showing no signs of distress or confusion. She'd laughed with friends, paid the bill, and left without a hint of trouble. Investigators turned their attention to the physical evidence. The SUV's windows had been closed, trapping the heat inside. Temperature charts later showed how quickly the interior turned lethal, with conditions exceeding 130 degrees within an hour of parking. Uriel, strapped in her car seat, had no way to escape or signal for help. The arrest affidavit noted Tracey's own words, a chilling admission that she only remembered the baby when prompted by her grandson. But as detectives dug deeper, they uncovered a disturbing detail. This wasn't the first time Tracey had lost a grandchild in her care. Ezra's death less than a year earlier came into focus, shifting the investigation from a single incident to a troubling pattern. The evidence mounted quickly, each piece more damning than the last. The car's scorching interior, the hours Uriel was left alone, and Tracey's casual demeanor all pointed to a failure that defied explanation. The question loomed large: how could this happen again? In early 2023, Tracey Nix faced justice in a Florida courtroom, her fate hanging in the balance. She was charged with 2 counts, leaving a child unattended in a vehicle causing great bodily harm and aggravated manslaughter. The prosecution built a compelling case, arguing that Tracey's negligence wasn't a one-time lapse, but a reckless disregard for the safety of those in her care. They pointed to Ezra's death as evidence of a pattern, insisting that Uriel's fate could have been avoided if Tracey had learned from the past. Their words were sharp, framing her as a grandmother who had failed her most sacred duty not once, but twice. The defense took a different tack, painting Tracey as a woman undone by grief and circumstance. They leaned heavily on her mental health struggles after Ezra's drowning, noting that she'd sought treatment and been prescribed Ambien, a sleep aid known to cause memory lapses and clouded judgment. They argued that her actions weren't intentional, but the tragic result of a mind overwhelmed by loss and medication side effects. It was a plea for leniency, a bid to shift the narrative from negligence to misfortune. The trial gripped the courtroom with its emotional intensity, nowhere more so than during the sentencing phase. Drew and Kayla Schock took the stand, their voices breaking as they spoke. Kayla, Tracey's own daughter, looked at her mother through tears and said, "I lost my daughter, and I lost my trust in the one person I should have been able to rely on." Her words hung heavy, a mother's anguish laid bare. Drew followed, his grief raw as he choked out, "We took every precaution after Ezra, but it wasn't enough. How could this happen again?" The pain in their testimonies echoed through the room, a testament to the lives lost and the bonds broken. After days of deliberation, the jury returned a mixed verdict. Tracey was found guilty of leaving a child unattended in a vehicle causing great bodily harm, but not guilty of aggravated manslaughter. The judge handed down a sentence of 5 years in prison, the maximum penalty for the conviction. In his ruling, he cited Tracey's apparent lack of remorse and her failure to fully accept responsibility, a decision that left the courtroom in stunned silence. Before tragedy defined her, Tracey Nix was a pillar of her community. For nearly 4 decades, she worked in Florida's education system, rising from a teacher to a school principal, known for her dedication. Colleagues called her highly regarded, a woman who poured her heart into shaping young minds. She carried that same warmth into her role as a grandmother, often stepping in to care for Ezra and Uriel when her daughter needed help. To those who knew her, Tracey was dependable, a steady presence in a busy world. But that stability began to crack after Ezra's death in December 2021. The toddler had wandered out of her home while she was distracted, slipping through an open gate and drowning in a nearby pond. The loss hit Tracey hard, plunging her into a grief she couldn't escape. She sought mental health support, and a doctor prescribed Ambien to help her sleep through the sleepless nights. Some experts later testified that the medication could have dulled her memory or awareness, a side effect that might have played a role in what happened next. Still, no charges were filed after Ezra's death. It was ruled a tragic accident, a moment of oversight rather than intent. When Uriel died less than a year later, Tracey's past came under new scrutiny. The similarities were striking. 2 children lost to preventable circumstances while in her care, yet there was no evidence she meant to harm them. Her actions, though catastrophic, seemed rooted in a mix of grief, medication, and the challenges of watching young children at 66 years old. Tracey's story is a complex one, a reminder that even those we trust most can falter under pressure they can't fully grasp. For the Schock family, life after Ezra and Uriel is a quiet, aching struggle. Drew and Kayla have spoken publicly about their grief, describing it as a weight that never lifts. Community vigils honored the children, with neighbors lighting candles and leaving flowers at makeshift memorials. Friends rallied around the couple, offering meals and support. but the Shocks admit that healing feels out of reach. In one statement, Kaila said, "We're trying to find a way forward, but it's hard to see past the empty spaces they left. Their pain is a constant companion, a reminder of the love they can no longer hold." Beyond their home, Uriel's death rippled outward, stirring conversations across Florida and beyond. Hot car deaths are a known danger in the state, where summer heat can turn vehicles into ovens in minutes. This case reignited calls for change, with advocates pushing for laws mandating car seat alarms and better education on child safety. It also sparked debate about caregiver accountability, particularly for older adults who may struggle with the demands of watching young children. Tracey's age and mental state became focal points, raising questions about how society supports those in her position. The lessons here are stark. Ezra and Uriel's deaths were preventable, tragedies that might have been stopped with more awareness or intervention. Their story urges us to look closer at the risks around us, to protect the vulnerable with every tool we have. It's a call to action, a plea to learn from this loss so others don't have to endure it. The deaths of Ezra and Uriel Shock stand as a heartbreaking chapter in a family's story, a wound that time may never fully heal. Tracey Nix, once a respected educator and grandmother, now serves a 5-year prison sentence for the loss of Uriel, a consequence that reflects the gravity of her failure. But no punishment can bring back the children whose lives were cut short, nor ease the agony of their parents, Drew and Kaila. This case has left an indelible mark, a tragedy that forces us to confront the fragility of trust and the cost of oversight. Yet from this darkness comes a chance for light. Uriel and Ezra's story has heightened awareness about the dangers of hot cars and the need for vigilance in childcare. It's a reminder that these losses are not inevitable, that we can act to prevent them. Remember Uriel and Ezra, two bright souls taken too soon. Let's work together to ensure no family endures this pain again. Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe for more stories that matter.